Okay, so let's go ahead and get ourselves started. So we are talking about the Iron Chef EduProtocol today. And the first thing that I want to mention to you is the agenda that we're going to be working through. What I want to do is kind of guide you through these 5 parts. So we're going to learn what an Iron Chef EduProtocol is. We'll kind of get used to the language together. I want to give you a chance to see an example, see what this kind of looks like so you can wrap your head around it. I want you to ask a bunch of questions as we go through this. So, as I'm demoing some things, I want you to think about in your class how you might use this, and just feel free to interrupt me at any point and ask a question. Let's also investigate what's already out there. What kind of resources exist? Who's already made blog posts with templates and different tools that you can use and then kind of customize so you're not starting from scratch. And then, if time remains, I want to give you some time to build your own if we end up with extra time. And if not, we're going to go 1 hour today. If there's not extra time, you can just do that, build your own whenever you've got some free time. But I want to give you all the building blocks today so that you feel confident building and doing all these things yourself going forward. So let's start off with this. What is an EduProtocol? EduProtocols are instructional lesson frames that are designed to engage students in learning through critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. What I love about EduProtocols is it's basically just a routine that you teach your students how to do, and then you use it over and over and over again and just drop new content into that frame. The idea behind EduProtocols is that teachers are busy. You don't have a whole lot of time to build things. Wouldn't it be great if we were able to build something once and then be able to reuse that over and over and over again? So if we were able to take the building part and make it short and quick and easy and offload most of the work to students, wouldn't that be beneficial? And if you're looking to do more of this, if you're looking to learn more about it, there are 2 books that are published by John Carippo and Marlena Hebern. They're the 2 authors of the EduProtocols. And so you'll see their 2 books here. And both of those are linked. So if you click that link, it'll take you over to the Amazon page for each. And if you're looking for like some last minute Christmas ideas or some things to throw into your wish list, you could check out either one of those. I have both. They're awesome. The Iron Chef is in there, as well as a whole bunch of other ones, 16 in the first and 12 in the second. That'll give you just great ideas for making your classroom very student centric and getting your students to be super active. So that's what an EduProtocol is in general. We've done 3 of these things. There was a Book of Kucha one a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and a Game of Quotes one, and we're doing the Iron Chef, which is one of my favorite today. But there's so many out there beyond this. So if you like what you're seeing in each one of these things, there's a bunch more in those books. So let's talk with what I think is the problem in class, which is we as educators are doing a ton of work preparing lessons, trying to come up with great things that engage our students and make the learning super exciting and dynamic. But we are working super hard, and our students, unfortunately, are fairly passive in the classroom most of the time. They're sitting in seats, they're trying to absorb the lesson that we're delivering to them. And it's not always the most engaging things for students. And quite frankly, they're a little bored and a little checked out and a little zoned out from time to time. And I think that's because we maybe have the balance of teacher work to student work a little bit backwards. And so I have long been thinking about, when I go home at the end of the day, I'm exhausted as a teacher. And I'm not sure my students are equally exhausted because I did more work than they did throughout the day. So I've been looking throughout most of my career, is there a way to flip this around and to try to get students to be more active? And I think the Iron Chef is a great way to do it. It's not necessarily like the cure-all that's going to fix everything that you want to have be better in your classroom, but it's a great tool that makes students more active participants. So the problem is students a little unengaged, and maybe a little static, and certainly a little checked out, and teachers working too hard. The solution, I think, to this is the Iron Chef. So let's talk about that. In comes the Iron Chef as our solution. If you're familiar with this concept, there's a series of TV shows called the Iron Chef cooking shows. They started in Japan at first, and then there was Iron Chef America here in the United States, and that's where I kind of saw it first on Food Network. But the idea in those Iron Chef TV shows is that you've got a bunch of chefs, and they have a limited amount of time to come up with an awesome meal. And at the end, there's going to be a panel of judges that taste everything and are trying to determine what's the most delicious out of all of this. So it's this super awesome dynamic game show kind of vibe and atmosphere. But on each one of those episodes, there's always a, hey, we need you to make a dish that's kind of like this. So there's a theme, there's a certain construct, but without a specific recipe necessarily. And then there's always the unveiling of a secret ingredient. So, hey, we're going to be making tacos and your secret ingredient is licorice. And you have to figure out how to take that secret ingredient and fix that in with the theme. And so that's one of the things that makes the Iron Chef so awesome, is this presence of the secret ingredient that kind of throws a bit of a curveball. So John Carippo is the one that kind of pioneered this, and he took that idea and said, what if we could make learning kind of feel like this, where we turn our students into chefs? They're the ones that have to prepare the meal and pitch it and present it to us, and we try to ratchet up the excitement and the energy and the speed at which people are doing things in class. So you see the little description here. Basically, this is a jigsaw activity with accountability, where we take a concept that we want to learn. I think here's the easiest way to do it. Think about a chapter in your book, or maybe one particular lesson. You've got a whole bunch of pages in that textbook that you might want students to read. And a traditional model is, I'll prepare a slide deck, I'll lecture about all of this, and students will like soak it up or take notes. What if instead we just handed them the resource and we said, hey, you do this part, you do this part, you do this part. And we kind of chunked the whole thing up and we said, you be an expert here, you be an expert here, you be an expert here. Well, we've been doing that with jigsaw reading for a long time, but the problem is there's no accountability. And that's kind of what Iron Chef seeks to solve by, instead of just making students read and understand it, they're the ones that have to create something that will represent it afterwards. So that's a very long-winded way of me saying Iron Chef is a jigsaw activity that incorporates Google Slides, and it goes quick, it's high energy. We make it kind of like a game show, and in the ones that I've seen, students get super excited about doing this because of the speed and the energy. All right, let me pause for a second. Any questions that have come to the forefront so far?
No.
All right, let's keep chugging along. So the question is, how are we going to do this whole entire thing? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to think about something that you're teaching in the near future. Let's say it's going to be some literary terms vocabulary, or let's say it's going to be a social studies unit and we're looking at the Reconstruction era or something like that. What we're going to do is we're going to prepare the Iron Chef activity. It's going to consist of 4 Google Slides plus 1 title slide. So 5 slides total, a title slide, and then 4 Iron Chef slides after that. Each slide is going to be different, but they're all going to follow a theme or a topic of study. So it might be Reconstruction is our theme, or literary devices is our theme, and then each one of those 4 slides is going to be slightly different. So you can think of that like this. Maybe early explorers is going to be our theme, and we're going to have 4 different early explorers on those 4 slides. Or we're going to do 4 food groups, or we're going to do 4 different literary devices, something like that. Or we're going to do, maybe we're studying a certain construct in geometry, and we're going to do 4 different pieces of vocabulary related to the geometry unit that we're doing right now. Then what you're going to do is you're going to link to resources that already exist. You're going to grab your textbook and figure out what material in there already makes sense that the students could devour very quickly, or what websites are out there. Maybe it's a digital page that goes with your textbook. Maybe it's just some other awesome science website that you found, or a math concepts website that you found, something like that. Heck, maybe there are even videos that you found that you want students to watch instead of reading text. It's up to you. It can even be a mix of different things, but you're going to find resources that already exist that will already teach your students the main ideas that they can basically read and then report back and summarize and paraphrase and curate for the audience. So you build this whole thing. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put students in groups of 4, and they are going to jigsaw the learning and complete their slide. So 1 slide is going to be completed per student. So if I've got 4 students and there are 4 slides, each one that's got a different early explorer, each student does the research on one of those early explorers and builds out their slide. Each student does the research on one literary device and builds out their slide. So they're becoming the expert in that one jigsawed piece. After that, students are going to present their slide deck, and the whole thing happens very, very quickly. It's high energy, and that's the whole entire process. So instead of me doing all of the teaching, instead of me preparing the lesson, I turn the learning over to students. I make them responsible for reading the information, building a slide about the information, and then the accountability piece is you're going to be presenting this either to the whole class or to a small, or within your group. And so while you're reading with purpose, because you've got to be the one that reports out what's the key idea. What are the important things that the early explorer did, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the general framework for what this is going to look like. And of course, we got to dive into the details for each one of these things as well. But that's generally how the activity is going to flow. The other thing I want to iterate or that I want to mention is that this is best when it's used weekly and you do it all year long. This is not an activity that you might do like once or twice a year. You want to basically do this Iron Chef at least weekly and then just put in new pieces of content every week. So it doesn't have to be as regular as like every Tuesday we do this. But you're basically going to use this as one of the methods, one of the strategies in your class when you want students to be active learners and you want them to explore knowledge and acquire knowledge without you having to be the one that disseminates everything, if that makes sense. So I want to show you next in our slide deck kind of what one of these generic slides looks like. When you're putting together your Google slide, you're going to notice this is very Spartan here. There's not a whole lot on it. We want this to remain mostly blank so that students do most of the work. But the key areas for this are on this slide. There's a space for students to insert images. This is going to get them really good with their image search skills and their visual representation skills. So we give them a space for them to insert an image related to whatever they explored. We give them a space to present the primary information. So if they're exploring for explorers, here's the big space where they can report out about whatever explorer they were supposed to research. And then there's also a space for them to work within the secret ingredient for this particular activity. And I'll show you some examples of those. So I thought what we would do next is we would look at a sample activity together. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to open it up. But if you've got your slide deck there, you could open this up as well and you can kind of click through on your own. So this part doesn't have to be totally passive. You can explore yourself on this. So this is kind of what a Iron Chef activity might look like that a teacher builds. So I'm going to click this and I think I might have to switch over here. Yeah, let's present a different tab. Okay, so here's my Iron Chef activity, and you'll notice there are exactly 5 slides. One is a title slide. It just says Lewis and Clark. That's, by the way, what the theme of this is going to be. And then there's a space that says your name here. So I would turn this over to students, and they would then change this part, and they'd be the ones that type in their names on this. So I'm just kind of building a real quick framework. And then here are my next 4 slides. I'll show you really quickly. Slide 2 says Lewis and Clark. Slide 3 is about geography. Slide 4 is about Sacagawea. And slide 5 is about animal discoveries. So it's all related to Lewis and Clark, but one student will be in charge of reporting back about Lewis and Clark. One will need to report back on geography, one on Sacagawea, and one on animal discoveries. And they might all take this in different directions. That's the great thing, is that they're jigsawing and working together collaboratively, but each one has their own responsibilities here. So there's no group work where one person's doing all the work and the others are being passive. Everybody's got something they have to fulfill. So on this first slide, here's what we have. It says Lewis and Clark, and then I've put in some instructions as the teacher. Click the video above or click here. So students can either click this to watch or they can watch the video here. So I found a video that I want them to watch. They've got the video, they can watch it. And then I have 3 questions that the students need to answer. Why was the expedition important? How did Lewis and Clark travel? What did Lewis and Clark accomplish? So that's what they're going to use this space for, is teaching us, the class, this information from the video. Then there's a space over here where they need to add an image to help illustrate their main point. So they're just going to replace this box with a Google image search and put that in here. And then you'll notice for my activity, here's the secret ingredient down here at the bottom, and it says this is to be done last. And my secret ingredient for this is this. See what it's like to travel with Lewis and Clark. List 2 to 3 facts here about the trip. Click here. So when they click here, this is a Google Earth exploration that they can do, and they just kind of poke around on their own, and then they come back and they list 2 to 3 facts about what they thought was interesting. So same thing for the other student, geography. For this, I gave them, instead of videos to watch, I gave them 2 articles to read, and then 2 different questions for them to answer. Same thing over here for Sacagawea. This one is no link. It just says grab your textbook, read pages 235 through 237, and answer these questions. So now they're going to use their textbook to answer these and report back to us. And then finally over here for the fourth student, visit this website and answer these questions. Here's a link out here to a History Channel website that goes over some of those things, and they can answer those. So really putting this slide deck together, you'll notice all of my slides are very Spartan. I just kind of made one and then duplicated it over and over again. And this did not take me as a teacher a whole lot of time to put together. In fact, I could probably use my teacher's edition and just look at each one of the subheadings in the chapter, look at some of those comprehension questions, and put those in as the content that I want students to kind of investigate and report back to us. So I figure out what my learning targets are. What's the stuff students need to know at the end of the day? Turn those into questions for them, and then they go forth and they do the reading and they do the paraphrasing to be able to get all their answers in there. All right, Lupita, I see you've got a question. Thank you so much for jumping in there.
So Caleb, so where you have the questions, who was Sacagawea, is that just a text box that doesn't have borders? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all that is.
So if we just add the borders, then the kids are more clear as to where that information goes. Correct?
Yes. And one of the things that you'll see some teachers will do is they'll make nice little boxes. I'll show you an example for that in a second. And others will teach their students, hey, I'm as your teacher, I'm going to throw some questions on here. What I want you to do is do the research and then delete everything that I've put on here as a teacher. So you delete this, like grab your textbook, you delete these questions and just customize this slide, turn it into exactly what you want it to look like as a student. Because your presentation of this information is going to matter as well. I wouldn't start like day one with that for students, but after they've done this a couple of times, you can say, hey, now I want you to delete all the stuff that is not part of you, that was from me. And I just want to be the stuff from your presentation to make your slide look awesome. And they really get into that kind of stuff.
Okay, I have a question. So for this too, you could add, so I teach science. So if I'm doing science, could I come up with like studying scientists right now? Like, would I be doing the research to find articles about the scientist and coming up with the questions and things? Or could this be as simply as working as a team, come up with, research for scientists, put a short video, 5 facts about that scientist, or go ahead.
So for Iron Chef, I would encourage you to go the first route. This is not like a long research project. You could do that with Google Slides.
Yeah.
This is much more, I as a teacher have already picked the information.
Got it.
Rather than me lecturing on this information, I want you to dive into it. I want you to find the key points. You come back here. You work on your summarizing skills, your paraphrasing skills, your pulling out main idea skills, your like being concise and on target with information. You don't have room and time to write a paragraph. I need this to be short bullet points. And then you present it back and become the expert for the classmates. So think for this rather than, like let's research for explorers or for scientists. Maybe it's just one scientist and you already found a killer article on it and you say, you need to do early life, you need to do period of discovery, you need to do legacy, that kind of stuff.
Got it.
So that you're chunking up, this information that I want students to know, how can I chunk this up and make them active rather than passive in the learning process?
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So that is, and the format I showed you right now is certainly not the only way that this ever needs to look. It's just kind of a jumping off point for you to wrap your head around, I see how this works. I see what my job is as a teacher. I'm just getting, I'm kind of inserting into this a framework for them. I'm giving them a landing pad and a space and the framework for the activity, and then they're doing most of the work afterwards. So one of the questions that I get from some teachers next is, okay, what does this look like once students are done, though? Can you show me some examples of student work, like live? And I was able to find a couple of examples that I wanted to share with you. So I'll just show these to you really quick. Here's an example of an activity that was all about democracy and doing some research that. So here's one page from a Iron Chef. This student had to cover the see how they run part out of the textbook. So that was on page 272. Teacher just asked one question: how is Greek and Roman version of democracy different? And so the student had to read that information and came up with, a couple of sentences that outline the main differences here. That's something I would have students do on a worksheet anyway. Now they're just kind of doing it on their own. Then they inserted an image that helped to illustrate that point. So here's the Greek system where everybody's got one vote, and here's the Roman system with representative democracy. And then take a look at the secret ingredient for this one. Secret ingredient was give examples of Roman leaders being power hungry. And you'll see the student didn't have time to complete that. But there's kind of a quick little example of like, we did the research and the learning here. And then this was a different kind of question, or get you thinking a little bit different from the main portion of all of that. Here's, sorry, were there any questions on this one?
Yeah, Caleb, just kind of looking at the template itself. So then we can go ahead and teach the kids how about sizing, because obviously the image square here is way bigger, doesn't give them a lot of room for those examples of leaders.
Yes. Yeah. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that. Students will mostly figure that stuff out. And for this, I like to think of these slides as they're quick and dirty slides rather than a polished final report kind of thing. It was just, can you hack together the learning quick and get us something that shows the main ideas to the class quickly? The whole idea here is it's about speed, not necessarily a perfect presentation. You'll also, in a class, you might have some students that put the image here. Others might decide to resize the image and put it down in the lower left-hand corner and move their text around. You can kind of be fluid with those things with your students. It all just depends what works for them.
Okay.
Here's another example from a different kind of Iron Chef project. So this was studying one person. Ellie Weisel was the person that they were studying, and the first student had to study a little bit about early life, and then this was during the Holocaust. So this was the second slide. The third slide, I think, was after the Holocaust, and the fourth one was legacy. So one article or one piece of text that talked about this person, and they just each chunked up a different period of their life. So you'll see they brought the learning back here in some bullet points. They found a couple of images of this person from this time in their life. And then the secret ingredient here was to list one quote that resonated with that student. So on each page, there was a different quote that the students kind of pulled out of the text. So that's a great way of having them go back in and probing a little bit deeper than just the meaning, but go find a quote for something as well. So I liked this one. Here's another example. I believe this was the 3 different branches of government. So here's the page that was all about the executive branch. And so you'll see for this one, the image, or the image that they found was just the seal of the office of the president over here. So again, you can leave the image part totally open-ended and see what your students come up with. I wouldn't give them too many constraints for that. Just say it's got to be an image that helps illustrate your point or relates to what you had to research. And then so over here, there's just a couple of bullet points on what the executive branch was. And the secret ingredient for this was each student had to explain how the branch that they related or that they researched related to the system of checks and balances. So this student talked about checks and balances within the executive branch. And then the student that researched the legislative branch talked about system of checks and balances relative to that branch. And then the one other example I had over here for you was the same idea. This is still an Iron Chef activity, but you'll notice the page looks different and the jobs of the students are different. So this is a vocabulary version of this, where you can see the teacher has kind of built this gridded framework where there's a space in the middle for a vocab word. There's a space in the upper left for definition, and the teacher said 2 definitions from 2 different sources. A space for students to write 3 sentences, and their note was 3 original sentences. Synonyms down here said 5 or more synonyms. And then there's 2 spaces here for images or GIFs that help represent that word. So the teacher built this frame once, and then you could see how this could be used, every couple of weeks. You do 4 of these with 4 new vocab words here. You never have to change the instructions for definition or sentences or synonyms. You just drop in new words and then let students go research that. And what I love about this is students for a long time have been looking up a vocabulary word, writing definitions, writing sentences, writing synonyms. What makes this more fun and engaging for students is I'm not doing it on a worksheet. I'm doing it in these cells. But also, since I'm connected to the internet, I can pull in an image or a GIF that helps to represent this word. And man, sometimes that visual really helps students understand and remember the meaning of each of these terms. So I love this kind of activity, and I've seen students get very excited about doing vocabulary acquisition and learning new terms through devices like this. So hopefully at this point, you're kind of like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do this thing. What do I need to do if I'm going to be a teacher and create some of these Iron Chefs myself? So I have over here some tips for you on building your own activity. The first thing I would recommend is to either grab a template, and I'll show you where to get some templates that are already started for you. Or if you want, you can build your own from scratch. Don't feel like you always have to use the templates that exist. A couple other tips for you. Keep the slides pretty plain so that your students do the work. I know as a teacher, I have a tendency to overbuild all my slides and make them look amazing. And so to do this with students, if you go back and you think about that example that I did, the Lewis and Clark one, you'll notice I didn't put in fancy backgrounds. I didn't put in like borders on the text boxes. I didn't even pick cool fonts other than just one title font. I tried to keep everything pretty plain Jane so that when students start to make it, they start to have something that looks more like this or this or this or this. That's where they're starting to put their own spin on it and they're doing the work. Another idea I have for you is where the resources could perhaps be linked. So you can put them in the slide. We had that on the vocabulary slide. We had that on the Lewis and Clark slide. Or you can put it down in the notes section. You know, if you've got a Google slide deck going, there's that place for presenter notes down at the bottom. And I've seen some teachers put the links down there. I've also seen teachers put the links on the first or the last slide, just put in an extra slide that has all the resources for all the students to use. Or they don't even have to be in your slide deck at all. You could literally grab, I think it was this one over here. This is just the main template background, and I'll give you access to this in a couple of minutes, but you'll notice there are no instructions on this. There's just 3 spaces for students. And so you could use that with no customization. And then in your class, you could just do something like on the classroom whiteboard, say, person number 1, here's what you need to do. Number 2, number 3, number 4, and here are your resources. Textbook pages, 289 to 297. Or the fifth option is you could put them in a separate post in Google Classroom. So don't feel like you have to put all the resources in your slide deck. You can keep the slide deck even more kind of Spartan. And then the other thing I recommend is to keep the task really simple. Remember, this is not a research project. This is how could students learn and acquire information really quickly instead of me lecturing about it. So you want to keep the task very simple, not super complex, because we're going to go really fast. Speaking of really fast, here's what makes the Iron Chef different from a Google Slides research report. The goal of Iron Chef is to be incredibly quick paced. This should never take more than a class period. It's not something that we're going to work multiple days on. It's going to be something that we do really quick. How long should we give students to read the information and to build their slides? The people that put this together recommend 10 minutes is the optimal amount of time. 10 minutes is kind of nice because it means you got to get to work right away and you don't have time to spend, kind of wasting time. And then when they go to the presentation part of it, you want to give students just like 30 seconds to present their slide. So if you're going to bring a group of 4 people up, you just give them 2 minutes. And so each one has about 30 seconds to present the content on their slide. And then we're moving on to the next one. And you'll see over there on that slide, Parkinson's law, which is work expands to the time available for completion. There's a school of thought on this that if you give students 30 minutes to do this, you won't have slides that are any better than what they would be able to turn out in 10 minutes. So we got to make this task quick so that students get down to business really fast and come up with some output really quick. So again, perfection is not the goal on this. It's just the speed that we're trying to go on. So what are our instructions? How are we going to chunk this thing through? Number 1, break your students into 4 groups. Each team captain then either opens their Iron Chef and shares it with the rest of the team, or if the teacher's using Google Classroom, you can share the slide deck with each group of 4 students. You can do the thing in Google Classroom where you go to assign it and you just check which 4 students get it assigned to them. And then you can say anybody in that group of 4 can edit the slide deck. So lots of different ways to get that out. Once they have that slide deck, each student will edit one of the 4 slides for his or her team. You can assign that ahead of time, or you can let them negotiate really quick, or they can, like roll a 4-sided die or something like that to determine who's going to do what slide. Once everybody's ready to go, they've got the slide deck, it's open, everybody knows which slide is theirs, you're going to start a timer for 10 minutes. And I really like to do this up with my projector or my New Line board. I will go to YouTube and I'll find a 10-minute timer. And so that countdown is visible for everybody. Or there's a couple of websites you can go to, like, do a Google search for stopwatch, and you'll find some of those tools that'll just put it up online for you. So students will be able to see the countdown while they're working. They can always glance up and see how much time they have left. What are students going to do? They're going to read through the material that you gave them. They're going to list 5 or more facts about the topic or question posed. They're going to add an image, and they're going to complete the secret ingredient challenge. If time remains, they can adjust the slide layout, they can adjust color, all that kind of stuff. I also mentioned, and we talked about this before, students can delete the information provided to make space for their own information. So you don't have to get hung up on exactly where does the picture go, exactly where does the secret ingredient go. Let them reorganize things to make it fit their needs. So when the timer goes off, that's when students have to stop working. There is no working past the bell. There's no like, I'll give you 1 more minute. That's it. It's 10 minutes. If it wasn't perfect, that's fine. Perfect is not the goal for this. It's high energy, and it's student activity, students actively learning instead of teachers teaching. Then what's next? Presentation time. We mentioned this before. Give each team 2 minutes to present their slide deck. Just have the first group come up. If you're doing this all through Google Classroom, you can even just pull their slide deck up through Google Classroom, display it up on the at the front of the room, and they can start going. The goal is 2 minutes to present their slide deck and for you to keep that tempo moving. You don't want things to bog down or take extra time on this. Then, to make it really fun, what we recommend is you adopt a panel of 3 to 4 American Idol style judges. And so you're just going to pick some students at random to be the judges and to critique each one of the slides. The students will sit up front. They're going to provide feedback to each one of the student groups that are presenting during that. And then you're going to rotate after each presentation. So the first, you've got a set of 3 or 4 judges for the first group. And then we're going to bring some new judges up after that presentation to judge the next group. So some bonus ideas for you. Name your student judges after some of the original iconic judges. You can grab like American Idol style stuff and go with Simon Cowell and Jennifer Lopez and some things like that. Have a whole lot of fun with each one of those. And then while this is happening, you're going to kind of play the role of Ryan Seacrest. You're the facilitator of all this. So you're going to roam the room. When the students are presenting, you're going to fill in information or you're going to correct misinformation that get up in the slides. So this is where you take the active role of clearing up any of those misconceptions and filling in all the gaps that students didn't discover on their own. And you're going to basically manage the big game show that's going on in your classroom. One of the questions I always get is, okay, how do I grade this thing? How do I score this thing? And I say keep it really simple. Each one of these should only be worth 30 points. You're going to offer 10 points for technical accuracy. Are the facts correct? Are the pictures good? 10 points for artistic impression. Is the slide cool? Is it pretty? What does it look like? And then 10 points for the overall perfection of the presentation. These are speaking skills, addressing the audience, their tone of voice, their delivery, avoiding things like, yeah, at the conclusion, as my son likes to do whenever he finishes a sentence now. Those kinds of things are what you're looking for. And so that's your 30 possible points. And there's 2 ways to do this. One is you could let your 3 celebrity judges each judge one of those things. So the first one is going to give you a grade for technical accuracy. The second one's going to do artistic impression. And they could just have boards and write a score on it and hold it up afterwards. And heck, you could make that the score for the presentation. Or they could do none of the judging and you just stand with a clipboard and you're grading while the students are presenting. So there's no take-home grading afterwards. You're getting your grade done right now live while they're presenting. Or if you feel like that's too much to manage, since it's all in a Google slide deck, you can go back after the fact, pull up their slide deck, and you can do some grading afterwards. So let me pause here for a second, and we'll get to some of the kind of the wrap-up ideas in this before you start to explore. Any questions that have come up so far? All right, I think we're doing well so far. So here's some of my key points for you. This will get good if you do regular use. So again, this isn't something that I want you to do just once or twice. I want you to think about doing this weekly in your class. Use this framework. Teach students how to play Iron Chef. And then you can drop new content, a new thing that we're studying. This week we're studying this. We're going to do an Iron Chef on it. This week our vocabulary words are this. We're going to do an Iron Chef on it. This week we're studying these concepts. We're going to do an Iron Chef on it and drop it in there. So you want to do this regularly. That way they never feel like any one set of this has to be too perfect. They kind of get used to the flow of this, and they get used to devouring information on their own, pulling out meaning, putting that together on a slide, and reporting it back to their students. That's kind of the key for the whole activity. The other thing I would recommend is that you ask questions that cannot be easily copied and pasted. This definitely increases the DOK level in there. So you're not just looking for the who, what, where, when. You're looking for explanations that pull a little bit more meaning out of that text. Obviously, you can flex this based on your grade level and content area. Just want to remind everybody, perfect is not the goal with this. I struggle with that because I'm a perfectionist in all the things I do, and I want student work to be an A+. That's not exactly what this activity is. It's, can students devour this content more efficiently than me lecturing about this information? Just know that when you do this the first time, it's going to be a bit of a mess, but the slides will improve over time as students do it more and more. Make sure you as the teacher stick to the allotted time that you've given for this. And the other thing is, keep the fun meter maxed out. This should never feel stressful for students. They should never feel like you're going to grade them on, nitpicking this, that, and the other thing. It should be a fun way for students to learn new content and information and share it back to their students. So that's the huge key part of all of this. I'm not going to go over the little thing on here, but you have this in the slide deck. I have some tips here in this table for you on flexing this based on your grade level. So if you're teaching K1, you might want to check out some of the details there. If you're teaching third graders, there's a couple of other details for you. And if you're in the 4 to 12 range, so that's most of us, there are some tips for you there as well. So this is flexible depending on your grade level, and even works for littles if you can kind of set up some constraints for you ahead of time. Another question that usually comes through from teachers is, okay, what can be Iron Chef? What can I do with this? Not everything can be taught well with Iron Chef. In fact, a lot of mathematical principles are not good for Iron Chefing different things. But what can be taught is, for instance, like math vocabulary and terms. That's great for Iron Chef. So you'll see on this list a couple of examples of different things that you can Iron Chef really well. And hopefully you can look at this and pull out something that would perhaps work for your content area and for your grade level. And again, you can come back to that once you kind of start to build your own. So here's where we are. We've got about 18 minutes left in the presentation, and I want to now turn some of this time over to you. I hope as we've been going through this that you've kind of been thinking about maybe an idea for how you could use this in your class, maybe an upcoming lesson. Maybe it's not next week because you might already have that all dialed in, or maybe leading into winter break, you're like, I got to do something fun with students. I need some things to take up some time next week. So maybe it's something that you would consider for next week, or if not, maybe it's something for January. But I want you to think about an activity that you could do with Iron Chef. Remember, think small. It's not meant to be a big giant research project. It's just, instead of me lecturing on this information today, let's make the students the creators, and let's get them really active. And then as you start to kind of get that in your head, what you can do is you can explore these three things here. So the first thing you can do is you can go to the Iron Chef EduProtocol homepage, and you can scroll down and take a look at the samples from the classroom area. I gave you like a little brief peek at a couple of these, like one slide here, one slide there today when we were taking a look at those. The full deck with all the examples are available there. So you can explore some of those examples that exist, and that'll get the creative juices flowing. After that, if you want, you can do some additional investigating. So I've given you some links there to different websites that people have been talking about this and talking about how they use it in their classroom, and what works for them. So you can take a look at some of those additional resources if you need a little bit more time. Or if you are ready to start building on your own right now, you can build on your own. So down at the bottom, you can grab a link to that template that we put there, or you can go look at any of those other examples and kind of customize those for your own purposes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you start to explore right now. You can click any one of those links and check it out, or you can start to build your own if you want to go straight to that template down at the bottom. But really for me, the building of the Iron Chef thing, it's not tough. You just have to think, what am I teaching? What material do I already have that I might want students to investigate? And then can I chunk this up into 4 different sized tasks? You do this part of it, you do this part, you do this part, you do this part. Put it on your framework, and then your activity is ready to rock and roll. I think most of the time you can put together these little frameworks in like under 10 minutes with your part, and then the students really get to work on it. And so while you're investigating, I'm here to answer any questions you have. So what has come up so far? What is on your minds? Okay, well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time if you feel like you've got most of what you need for this. Obviously, you haven't had enough time to build a whole entire activity, but like I said, they don't take too terribly long to create. So what I would recommend is just next time you get a little bit of time, start putting one together. And then if you've got questions for me, or if you want to send it to me and say, what do you think about all this? You can obviously bounce those ideas off of me at any point. I'd be happy to do that for you. The last request I have for you is, if you would, just to go and to complete our little workshop survey that we always do for these. Let's see, I'm trying to get the link dropped into the chat. Hey, I think I got it. And we just use this internally to track how we're doing. They ask us to report back some data every once in a while to see, are these workshops effective and helpful for people? So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of seconds to complete that for me, I would appreciate that. And then after that, that's it. That's all I've got for you today. So you are welcome to leave once you're done with the survey. You've got the slide deck now in the shared with me portion of your Google Drive, so you can pull that up at any point and look through that and review all the ton of information that I gave you today. I know this was chock full of a lot of details, but hopefully you can use that as a reference later once you start to build out some Iron Chef activities.
Thanks, Caleb.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Happy holidays, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.